Hello, and welcome to the 2020 Graduate Admissions Workshop hosted by the Texas A&M University Department of Biochemistry and Biophysics. I am so excited to have all of you join us today. So before we get started, I will quickly note that our chat box is open for questions. Our graduate program specialist, Nolan Savage, will be fielding some of the short answer questions directly in the chat throughout today's talk. And if there are any that require a bit more discussion, he'll toss them to me for the last few minutes. If we don't get to your question today, don't worry about it. I will do my absolute best to get back to you by email over the next few days. So I'd like to introduce our workshop by telling you a little bit about who we are and what we hope that you will gain over the summer. My name is Justine deGruyter, and I am an administrative postdoctoral associate and the graduate program coordinator here in the Department of Biochemistry and Biophysics. By way of brief background, I was born and raised in Las Cruces, New Mexico, where I also did my Bachelor's of Science in Chemistry at New Mexico State University. While there, I participated in the NIH-funded MARC program. I know we have a number of MARC scholars in the audience today, and that was really where I discovered my love of chemistry and scientific research. In the summer of 2013, I was selected to participate in the Amgen Scholars Program, where I did a 10-week internship at UC Berkeley. Amgen Scholars is a phenomenal program that you will hear more about toward the end of the summer from Professor Dmitry Kurowski, along with other opportunities for undergraduate research. That fall, I started my own graduate admissions cycle. I applied to 8 schools and I'm proud to say that I was 8 for 8 in terms of acceptances, including to schools like Harvard, Yale, Berkeley, Columbia, among others. Now, I say this not to brag and certainly not to paint myself to be some chemistry genius, but rather to convince you that good mentorship is critical in this graduate admissions process. I was very fortunate to have 2 professors who helped me understand what a successful applicant looked like every step of the way. In developing this workshop, it is my hope that we can do the same for each of you. I ended up accepting an offer at the Scripps Research Institute, where I began my graduate studies in 2014. There, I worked with Professor Phil Barron, studying methods for the development and synthesis modification of drug-like biomolecules. The first 3 years of my graduate studies were funded in full by a National Science Foundation Graduate Research Fellowship Program, more commonly known as the NSF GRFP, which Professor Gary Kunkel will tell you about later this summer. Finally, I graduated in 2019, made my way here to College Station, Texas, where I've been able to pursue my interests of science communication and outreach. So our topic today will focus primarily on the admissions process from the perspective of the applicant. What do you need to do and when? Next week, you'll hear from Professor Jean-Philippe Pellois, who is our associate head of the graduate program, and he will tell you about the same process from the perspective of the reviewer. What are they looking for? The following week, you'll hear from Professor Cho, who will talk to you about the importance of familiarizing yourself with your prospective university's graduate program and their research programs. How do you get to know the faculty, and when does it become appropriate to reach out to them for more information? Professor Zhang will then talk to you and help you understand how to craft a compelling statement of purpose, wherein you address the why, the what, and the how. Why are you applying for graduate school? What do you hope to gain from that experience? And how have you prepared yourself for success? Professor Cruz Reyes will then tell you about the other supporting documents that help round out your entire application package, including your CV. What is a CV and how is it different from a resume? What material belongs on a CV? He'll also tell you about grades, which I know in my experience has been one of the biggest concerns that prospective graduate students have. Do grades really matter, and how are they evaluated in the larger context of your application package? He'll also tell you a bit about the GRE. Now, our program no longer requires it, nor do many others, but there are still some that will require that you sit the exam and submit your scores, so it's good to know. And finally, he'll give you some information about strong letters of recommendation. Who do you ask and how do you ensure that you are cultivating relationships that will help writers craft a strong and substantive letter on your behalf? Professor Dmitry Kurowski will then talk to you about undergraduate research opportunities, including for those of you who are at non-research intensive institutions. As I mentioned, Professor Gary Kunkel will tell you about the federal fellowships that are available with an eye specifically toward the NSF GRFP. And finally, we will wrap up this summer series with Professor Caro, who will talk to us about the next steps. How do you navigate that transition from being a good undergraduate student to an outstanding graduate researcher? So as I mentioned, when looking at the application process, we can really view it from two vantages, that of the applicant and that of the reviewers. So I know that more than half of you are rising seniors who will likely be applying in this upcoming cycle, so starting this fall. For the rest of you, this timeline won't quite match up exactly with yours, but all of this information will still be relevant in the year, next 2 years, and a lot of it will be directly applicable to applications for summer internship opportunities, for example, or other undergraduate research programs. So for those of you who will be applying in the upcoming cycle, this is the exact right time to start thinking about your applications. So the first question that I suggest that you begin to answer is, how many schools will you be applying to and which schools? So the question of how many will of course vary from person to person, but something that I will note that you may not be aware of is the cost. Unfortunately, the graduate cycle can have a number of hidden costs that you should be prepared for. So I'll do a quick plug for our program. We waive the application fee for all of our applicants, domestic and international, but many, if not most, schools still require a fee, which can often be upwards of $100. I told you that I applied to 8 schools, and indeed I ended up paying about $800 for the mere privilege of applying. That was not a cost that I was necessarily prepared or willing to bear. Less than a year from moving across the country to attend graduate school, nevertheless I did. So this is something that you may consider. You may want to apply to many, many schools, but when it actually comes down to it, it does become cost prohibitive. So be savvy and be smart in the ones that you select. Perhaps the easier question to answer then is, which schools should you apply to? The best piece of advice that I can offer you here is to select schools in which there are at least 3 faculty members with whom you would be excited to work. This is a tale as old as time. We have seen it many times over. A student goes to a school with the intent of working with exactly and only one professor. They show up, and for whatever reason, it doesn't work out. Maybe there is a funding issue, maybe that lab has already accepted a student for that year, personality clashes happen, or maybe your research interests just didn't align as well as you had hoped. You put all of your eggs in this one basket. You are now stuck. What do? Don't be that person. Again, be smart, be savvy in where you choose to apply. Identify at least 3 people that you would be excited to work with. Once you narrow down this list and you've established which schools and how many you would like to apply to, consider whether they require the Graduate Records Examination, or the GRE. Again, we no longer require it. Many schools are opting for that same path. There is very little evidence to suggest a correlation between GRE scores and success in graduate school. Unfortunately, this has been a historical requirement. Schools are often reluctant to change, so there are still a number of schools that will require it. If you are applying to a school that does need the scores, register now. Give yourself plenty of time to study. On top of that, do they need other exams? So some will require the GRE General. Others may require both the GRE General and the GRE Subject Test. If you are international, also consider language proficiency exams. If you did your schooling here in the US, there are often waivers available, including here at A&M, that will allow you to forego those language test scores. Now, if you do decide to register for the exam, the next question, and again, another hidden cost, should you register for a prep course? The GRE, just like anything else, is an acquired skill. All standardized tests are. You may not be very good at standardized tests, and that's okay. This is not a reflection of your intelligence, certainly not indicative of your ability to be successful as a graduate student. It's just the reality. If that's the case, you succeed by learning how to play the game. How do you learn? You ask the people who know the rules. Often, those are found in prep courses. Can get expensive, so again, consider this into your total cost and in all of the considerations that you are looking for when you start to think about your application. Now, this summer is also an excellent time to begin drafting your documents. So while you'll hear more about these documents and what exactly should go into them, I'll briefly review them here with you today. So first, most programs will require a statement of purpose, which is sometimes called a letter of intent, letter of interest, research statement, any various combination of any of these words. But again, they're all typically looking for you to answer the same questions: the why, the what, and the how. Write your first draft, make it a good first draft, and then be prepared to ditch that first draft down the line. Once you're confident in your working draft, this would be the time to move on to your CV. Again, what is a CV? Simply put, it is your sales pitch for you. Make sure that you understand the content that needs to go on there. Make sure that it looks good and that you are happy with this as the paper representation of you as an applicant and as a scientist. You'll also want to begin thinking about your transcripts. Looking at the schools that you have decided to apply to, do they recommend or even require prerequisite coursework? If so, have you taken them? If you have taken them, are you happy with your grades? If the answer to either of these questions is no, this is the time to start working out your fall and spring semester schedules such that you can meet those prerequisite recommendations or requirements. Now, a quick thing to note here, hopefully after this workshop, all of you will submit phenomenal graduate application packages, which means that you will be invited to a number of recruitment weekends in the spring. Recruitment weekends mean that you will be missing days of school. Most of these weekends run from either Friday to Sunday, sometimes even Thursday to Saturday or Thursday to Sunday. You will also be missing weekends of study and homework time, which I assume is what all of you do in your spare time on the weekends. But you do need to consider this. Most of the prerequisite recommendations will be upper division course with fairly rigorous coursework. Does it make sense for your schedule to register for those classes in the spring when you will almost certainly be traveling and missing class? Now, the next thing to think about, although it is a little bit early to start asking for your letters of recommendation, note that I say ask, not tell, it's not too early to begin thinking about who you would like to ask. With whom have you cultivated a strong relationship such that they can provide a strong and substantive letter in support of your application? Ideally, people who can talk about your potential for success in graduate school. Once we move out of the summer, we've now hit late September, early October. You have your fantastic first drafts in hand. You know exactly which schools you're going to apply to, and you have settled into what is bound to be a very bizarre fall semester. October is where the graduate admissions cycle really kicks off. My first recommendation here is that you create a spreadsheet with a list of the schools that you are hoping to apply to, deadlines, and every required document, including any special instructions, extra essays, for example. Some may require an additional essay. Also, schools may ask you to address specific questions in your statement of purpose. Are you directly and clearly addressing those questions? All of these instructions, all of these documents should be included in this spreadsheet. For the deadlines, bold it, highlight it, whatever you need to do so that you do not miss them. Now again, we have our first drafts of our statement of purpose, we have our first draft of our CV. Rip it apart, put it back together again, and repeat. Writing is editing, writing is rewriting. This is your opportunity to wow an admissions committee in 2 documents. Make sure that you are putting your best foot forward. Here, I also recommend that you ask at least 2 people to carefully review these documents. Ask 2 trusted friends, colleagues, faculty members, advisors, whomever. Just make sure that they are people you can trust to be honest, fairly critical, and preferably with a fairly good grasp of the written English language. First impressions matter, and when we receive documents that are riddled with typographical errors or grammatical errors, the narrative makes no sense, it's very difficult to read, we notice this, and it does not reflect well on you as an applicant. Don't be moved to the decline pile over a typo. Now, once we reach the end of October, early November, we start to see the early fellowship application deadlines, including that for the NSF GRFP. Now, this would also be an excellent time to begin soliciting your letters of recommendation. As I said earlier, you should not tell people that you will be putting them down. You should ask politely whether they can provide or are willing to provide a strong and substantive letter in support of your application. Again, we come back to the hidden costs. Most of you will be moving at least across the state, if not across several states, maybe even the country, to attend graduate school. Moving is expensive, and very few programs offer a moving allocation or a sign-on bonus that will help alleviate those costs. This is the time to begin saving and to begin preparing. We now reach December, where you will find the vast majority of application deadlines. Here's the time to go back over your statement of purpose and your CV once again. Make sure that they are the best representation of you possible. Also refer back to that handy cheat sheet that you made in October. Have you made all of the deadlines, and have you submitted every document that you have been asked to submit? Now, I can't speak to every program, but I can say that our admissions committee does not consider applications that arrive after the deadline. You could be the best applicant in the world, and if you submit on December 2nd, when our deadline is December 1st, you won't be reviewed, period. Again, do not find yourself in the decline pile because you missed the deadline. Now, when it comes to letters of recommendation, this ends up a little bit sticky. Faculty members often comprise the admissions committee, and of course, you are typically asking faculty members to write these letters. Our committees understand faculty are busy. Your request for a letter likely ends up on top of an ever-growing pile of things to do. That said, it is still your application and your responsibility to politely follow up and make sure that these letters are submitted on time. We then come to the most exciting part of the graduate admissions cycle, January, February, which is where we will see most of the recruitment weekends. Now, depending on your field of study, the format may differ a little bit. Some fields, so chemistry is a representative example, send out the offers of admission ahead of the weekends, meaning this is a true recruitment visit. You are there to be wined, dined, and convinced that Texas A&M University is the place for you. Many other programs, including most life sciences, take a different approach, wherein you have now passed the first hurdle, which is your written application, and you are invited to come for an interview recruitment weekend. This weekend is intended to be mutually beneficial. You, as the student, get to take a look at the program, talk with the faculty, importantly, talk with the current students, and determine if this is a place that you can commit to for the next 5 to 6 years. On the other side, it's also an opportunity for the faculty and the program to decide if we are willing to invest in you for the next 5 to 6 years. In either case, you are there to impress. How do you do this? First, you review and familiarize yourself with the faculty research programs. Make sure that you can talk to anybody that you are seated next to, be it at lunch, dinner, even on the ride to lunch or dinner. Make sure that you can discuss their work with some confidence when you're sitting in their office across from them in an interview setting. And make sure that you can talk to their students so that when they tell you about their own work, you understand and can converse back and forth. For those of you who are already participating in undergraduate research, this is also your opportunity to execute that elevator pitch. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this term. It is your big picture, 30-second explanation of what you do and why. In short, be able to talk about your work, be able to talk about their work. And finally, ask questions. Ask questions of everybody that you speak with, including, most importantly, the current graduate students. You are committing a significant chunk of your life. This is a big decision. Be informed before you make it. By the end of February to mid-March, we'll usually see our last visits, and normally this is when your offer letters will begin to roll in if they haven't already. This is when you have them all laid out in front of you, and you get to consider your options. Think carefully about the type of research that you want to pursue. Harkening back to my first point, are there still 3 faculty members that you would be excited to work with now that you have visited the campus, now that you have seen the labs and spoken with these professors? What about the cost of living? Is the stipend that they've offered, does it match the cost of living? Can you comfortably live? You're never going to be rich as a graduate student, surely, but is this something that you won't have to worry about on a daily basis? Think about your interactions with the graduate students. Graduate school is tough, it's very stressful, they're probably not going to be super happy, but are they not actively miserable? Do they look like they're enjoying what they do? Are they excited to talk about their research? This is going to be you. This will be your cohort. These will be your peers. Are you excited to spend that much time with them? Now, as you are finalizing your decision, this is where we come to April 15th, the end of the cycle. Several years ago, the Council of Graduate Schools established the April 15th resolution, to which most of the programs that you will be applying to are signatories of and have agreed to abide. In short, the resolution states that students are under no obligation to respond to or accept offers of financial support before April 15th. This extends to all offers of financial support, including scholarships, fellowships, and importantly, assistantships. So typically in STEM programs, when you are offered admission, that is paired with an offer of assistantship support, either research or teaching. No school can tell you that you need to make a decision on a fellowship, scholarship, or assistantship before April 15th. Now, if you are confident in your decision, if you have already made your choice, by all means, send your acceptance. However, do not let them pressure you into a premature decision. Know your rights. And as I said, April 15th really wraps up our graduate admissions cycle. Hopefully that gives you a good sense of the timeline that you can expect as an applicant. And as I said, you can be confident that each of these different aspects will be covered in detail over the next 10 weeks. So with that, I know that we have some questions I see flashing in the corner here. So Nolan, are there any questions that I can help answer?
Hi, Justine. Yes, we have a few questions, a lot about the letters of recommendation.
Sure.
So first I'll ask, we have a lot of questions about how can you maintain relationships with PIs, professors, etc., in order to get good letters of rec?
Absolutely. So I know as an undergraduate student, it can often be challenging to interact with faculty outside of these really large lecture classes. So the easiest and most obvious example is participating in research. Once you work in their lab, make sure that you are talking with them. Don't stand in the corner just washing a piece of glassware and hoping that they'll notice you and hoping that you're going to stand out. Make sure that you are contributing as best you can. You are not armed yet with all of the knowledge to substantively contribute to some of this research, but you can certainly make it clear that you are there to learn and you are there to work. Once you do that, it makes it really easy to begin cultivating those relationships with faculty, at least on a research side. In terms of other faculty, especially if you're not at a research-intensive institution, your primary mode of interaction is going to be in class. If there are faculty members with whom you have taken several classes or you know you will be taking several classes, attend their office hours. Get to know them. I know many professors, and one of the most common complaints that I hear is that students never attend their office hours. And then as a side note, complain when they get bad grades. But really, if you take this opportunity, that their door is open, that is what they are there for. Introduce yourself, meet them, speak with them. This is how you get to know them and how you can be confident that they can provide a good letter of support. Anything else, Nolan?
Yeah, I think another good question is about, we have a few questions about contacting professors, and I know Dr. Cho will cover that, but we have another good one about contacting program coordinators to show interest in the program, if that's acceptable and how that should be approached.
Oh my gosh, yes. So as the program coordinator here, absolutely, please contact me, contact Nolan. So let me get back to the screen where my contact information is. My email is down here, justine@tamu.edu, if you don't already have it. If you are interested in our program, reach out to me. I can't speak for everybody, but I would be very surprised if there were any program coordinators who would not be thrilled to hear from interested prospective graduate students. Definitely reach out to them. We can probably have one more, Nolan.
Okay, I just saw a good one. Oh, so how early should applicants submit their full application? Is it beneficial to do it early? Should you wait? What's the best time?
Yeah, no, that's a really good question. And I would say that probably depends on the program, but if I had to guess based on anecdotal evidence and conversations with other people, not only here at Texas A&M, but also other universities, most will not start the review process until after the deadline. So I encourage you to submit early because sometimes things do go wrong. Sometimes you think you've submitted all of the application components and then you get an email from Nolan saying, hey, we still haven't received your CV. It's good to know that ahead of time. Give yourself time. Internet crashes, computers crash, whatever. Always a good idea to submit at least a few days, if not a week in advance. That said, I honestly can't see any advantage to submitting, say, in October. If it makes you feel better to be on top of it, I'm not going to discourage it, but I don't know that there is a distinct advantage. That said, so some programs like ours will have a priority deadline versus a final deadline. If you can get it in before the priority deadline, that does typically mean that you will be reviewed in the first batch of applicants, which just necessarily means that you have a better shot of being at least invited to the recruitment weekend. All right, well, it looks like that's about time. As I said, feel free to reach out to me. Even if you're not interested in our program, you just want to talk more about the process, you need some help, you have questions that we need to answer, please send me an email. I am always available to help. I hope that we'll see you next week, and thank you so much for joining us today. Bye-bye.